2, 3. Hello and welcome to the Brainstorm Podcast. And now, your host, Sonny Perlman.
We are live. How about that? Dave, hello.
Good, how you doing?
Okay. It's really good to see you. You kind of got me riled up before we started.
Yeah. We've been talking for a little
I've
bit.
been talking for a while, trying to figure out the audio, and you got me riled up. So I have you here, been friends forever, but you've been doing some really cool stuff, which is you're one of the only people I know who starts things for profit and tries to, what'd you say? You said a line. Tell me the line.
We're for profit with a non-for-profit mission.
Right. It nearly doesn't exist. As a matter of fact, I will say I had Svi Haber on.
Sure.
Good friend of yours, Svi Haber? Yeah. Say he's a good friend.
Yes,
no, I'm kidding. He is a good friend. I love Svi Haber.
Exotic.
Yeah.
Helping out a very...
He's an awesome dude. And he was quoting, I forgot who he was quoting. Maybe he didn't use the guy's name, so that's good. And he said, you're either making money or you're helping. Make your choice. That is what Svi said. It was very powerful. And Svi's way of dealing with this was, I make money in the rehabs, and I also do other things for helping, and like he kind of figured out ways to manage it.
Right.
You have a different philosophy on this.
Yeah, maybe, but I think there's probably some overlap. I think you need to make money to help people.
So tell me about that. Tell me about why you got to make money to help people. You move the mic a little closer, because I think I'm closer. No, pull the whole thing. There you go. Sorry. Go. Yeah, okay. What do you think? Okay, so explain that. Explain you need to make money to help people.
Well, when we're talking about like...
If I'm too challenging, just tell me to simmer down.
No, if we're talking about like providing care to people, clinical care for addiction, mental health, like that costs money, right? Like people need to be paid. We all live in, a world where sometimes, not always, but the better people, need to be compensated for their time.
Right.
So we need to figure out a model where, we're constantly providing the best care, right? At the same time, I think it's helpful when there's a business plan that makes sure the money's coming in order to provide that care that's needed.
Right.
Can you do that with a non-for-profit model? Sure. I think so. But I personally, we like to stay focused on the for-profit model, but make sure, like you said, I think it's maybe just language. I don't know that there's a difference if we are putting care first.
Well, I'll tell you the truth. It's interesting. I never really put it in these words, but I almost do the opposite, but it's the same, where I want to run a non-for-profit like a for-profit.
Right. So it may be
the exact same thing.
Like we were just discussing, I need non-for-profit sometime because if someone else is paying for someone's care, that's a donation,
Right.
So like maybe I should just switch it. Like I've thought of that. Like it's just a matter of never falling back, I guess, on either looking to just make money or looking to just fundraise, because I think then you're not always reevaluating, like, are we providing the best?
Right.
And
so I jumped straight into the topic. I'm going to talk more about stuff, but because this topic is wildly frustrating to me.
So if you want, I could tell you when in my career I thought of this, or I sort of came up with this.
Okay, let's back up and talk about what brought you into this in general. Right now, you want to just say what you're running right now,
right now we have a really special program that we opened up called Genesis Treatment in Israel, and that's really that model, that for-profit with a non-for-profit mission,
right?
Providing care at a residential level to men, outpatient. Intensive outpatient, really all levels of care, meeting people where they're at. Potentially, if they're in Israel, if someone's traveling from America, it's usually for residential level of care. People with substance use, drug addiction in their story,
right?
But focused on the underlying mental health and trauma that they're struggling with at the same time.
Right. And the interesting thing about this program is that, and this is going to speak to how excited I am about the program, is that you're the third person to have on. I even said to you before, guy, we got to talk about something else.
We're not talking.
No, we can talk about it, but I was like, we got to talk about some other things because the deal is that on this podcast, I have people I like on, and people that are doing things. And it happens to be you're the third person that I like, and I would totally have on my podcast in general. And you have me involved in the same program.
And what's cool about the first two people, for sure, me is a little different story. Maybe is they're not involved because of the money.
Not at all.
Even if there is money.
So it's right, Charlap and Menachem Poznanski.
Not. I mean, like Menachem will not. He's never aligned himself with a rehab. He's surely not doing it for money. I joke around. I probably shouldn't say this on air. If it wasn't for his wife, I probably wouldn't have to pay him. You know, because that's just Menachem.
That's true.
He doesn't. He's similar to you in that sense.
Yeah.
It's never about.
I have not my wife. I have Eli Arenthal, who's sitting here. I'm not allowed to be in charge of money.
But you're talking about people who are busy and doing a lot of good things, so their time is valuable. And everyone heard Rabbi Karlap's reason for going into this and out of frustration, looking to just help people.
Right. And you're...
I mean, I'm doing the same thing, but I have more of the responsibility to make sure it stays open and the finances are working and come in. They don't burden any of that. They're there just to help people.
Right.
So it's a little different. I'm one of the,
So, okay, so go back to why you started, because I tell you why I'm very, very curious is because you seem to be taking the hard way. Meaning, I know people in the business that are they figured out how to make the money, and they're running off, and
I try not to think about it.
They run to the bank and they do great. And then I know people from non-for-profit, and everybody sits there patting them on the back and making them feel great that they're such tzaddikim, they're doing great. Right. You're doing the worst of both worlds in a sense. And it takes a freaking lot to do it. I know, because I'm like, come on the other way, sort of.
Yeah, for sure.
So tell me where this all started. You can go back as far as you want.
I don't want to go back too far because I'll just talk for too long. But
that's why we have you here.
Yeah, it's
a long form conversation.
So, I mean, I'm in long-term recovery. I'm sober now. Closer to 16 years. In May, it'll be 16 years.
Wow.
It's a long time.
You don't look old enough to be in recovery.
I got sober at 23.
Okay.
Fortunate enough to get married a couple of years later and start a family. Not the other way around. I'm very grateful for that.
That was a good move.
Yeah, I got lucky. Before that, I mean, I have a very typical, just to who I am. I call myself like the typical drug addict, I guess, if we want to use that term.
What does that mean?
Someone who was, addicted to drugs. Just like a low self-esteem child, lack of skills. We see a lot of this today because I think the generation is worse off. Loving mom who tried to bail me out of ever having anxiety, which in turn probably gave me more anxiety. And then I found drugs and alcohol, and I felt like I arrived, and I had some self-confidence. I was always a little overweight, like very typical. We didn't have the term bullying, but I guess people probably, and I had a chevra and a community, and I started smoking weed at a young age and experimented with all sorts of other drugs throughout the years. Not really successful at it. Like some people have a lot of fun years. I pretty much always had consequences, whether it was with my parents, school, car accidents. Thank God never hurt anyone.
So you never enjoyed it.
Well, I'm saying I did, for periods, for summers and this and concerts and, had a good time, but I didn't make it too long,
Can I ask you just for the because I generally don't have people opening up a little about their use and I don't know if how deep you want to go, but a lot of people listening are very curious from the point of view as someone who's been through it. Right. First of all, how young are we talking about starting?
Yeah, I was also ninth grade, so whatever that is, 14, 15, I guess. I don't know.
Right.
14. But very, also, I don't know, I use the word typical, but very gradual. New Year's Eve, first time.
Right.
And like, random weekends.
But did you get immediate satisfaction, like you did it and all of a sudden your life was sort of better?
It's hard to remember, but yeah, I use the term, and obviously I've heard people share their story over the last 15 plus years.
Right.
But I resonate with like feeling like I arrived. Like now I had something.
Right.
And I slowly but surely kind of made that my identity.
It's very fascinating. A lot of people that talk to me that have no experience with this, they like talk about the taiva idea, like, oh, you like feeling good. And everybody I deal with who's an addict, who's always experiences that, like you're saying, I've arrived. It's not about the feeling good. It's about being all right.
Right.
Is that what you're saying? Like this?
Yeah, I think right. I think things have changed today. Right? I think
Why?
Meaning, like, I think you have people who are just maybe smoking weed because it's so readily available. Right? Like more kids.
Right.
And it's stronger. So like it might just been, oh, that feels good. Oh, that feels good. And then next thing you know, your brain kind of like.
But I think that always existed.
Maybe.
But not the addicts. Meaning,
right.
I had a lot of friends and who
correct.
enjoyed.
And then stopped.
They had a great time.
Right. So.
But they would be able to stop.
Right. So I think that's shifting now because I think the drug is stronger. But that's like a separate topic.
Oof, I want to dive into that topic. Wait a minute. So you're saying?
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm cutting you off so early. But you're saying that the drug is so powerful that it sucks in even non-addicts.
Yeah. I think there's some science because we're gonna lose this topic, but that's fine if you want.
Well, because I've been literally preaching the opposite. That like addiction is.
So I'm not an expert on it,
right.
so I don't want to dive deep into it. And I know, like, as a society, we don't even have the amount of information as we should on weed because the government scheduled it as a class whatever drug, and we couldn't do. Like, we got tons on nicotine today.
Right.
And we know what vaping and. So supposedly the science that I've heard is, and this makes sense to me, and I'm not like an intellect, is like you smoke weed or you smoke nicotine even, like especially if you vape, you get a high dose of it, your brain releases dopamine. Oh, that feels good. Why else would you get high if it didn't feel good?
Right.
People smoke cigarettes. Yeah, there's physical addiction maybe comes with nicotine, but like even before that. So if you're young, this is what they're going out and preaching to the youth today.
Okay.
I think it's a good message. Your brain's in development in adolescent years. Some say till you're 20-something.
Right.
So if your brain, if it says, oh, that feels good, then your brain eventually might, the claims say, that's how I feel good.
Right.
So we're like in a different, I don't want to go too far into that, but it's
okay, we won't go.
But
I'll hit up the next professional
right, but we
this.
used to joke around, though, because, like, I mean, it was 16 years ago, but like it wasn't the weed of my parents. Like it was still strong.
Yeah.
But like today we're talking about like 40% THC. I recently saw someone's, it's all packaged and tells you.
Right.
I mean, that's a pretty powerful substance.
I'm saying you became an addict at the wrong time.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying.
We used to have to go to extremes to find things like that. Yeah.
Today's weed is our day's heroin. It was like
okay, so the question is on that topic, and you'll wait for the next professionals, can you rewire the brain because you're in development to need the drug to feel good? So it's not a physical addiction, it's in the brain. There's a psychological science.
Well, I think it's more about coping and not about feeling good. It's about feeling all right. And feeling good I don't believe that feeling good is what does it, like your dopamine and the rush, because there are tons of people that do tons of dopamine things and then they move on with their lives. I mean, you ever do cliff diving? Right. It's freaking great. I love it. Right. I'm not doing it every day. I mean, I'm saying if I was around the cliff, I wouldn't do it every day.
Right, so I agree with you. So that's what I relate to, and I think we're back on the same page. Is if anyone's coming from a place of not feeling okay,
yes,
and then they find that, just like working out, right? You could work out to the point of destroying your life, like I don't know,
right?
Whatever, not eating, bodybuilding to the point, or
right.
It's just definitely a healthier way to go, probably till you get to that point. Yeah, so that's yeah.
Right,
so
but also the other thing, I had a guy a long time ago, and I remember literally he like smoked pot for the first time, and it completely shifted his whole social circle. He was cool.
Right.
Like, did that happen to you? Like similar
some
to that?
extent, yeah. I mean, I had a group of friends kind of instantly.
Right.
Or with like the older kids.
Yeah.
You know, here you had someone that wasn't comfortable, like I'm talking about myself, in my own skin, so to speak. I mean, that's a terminology that we also, hear a lot. Whether it was stuff going on at home or mixed messages for whatever the reason, like I said, maybe being overweight. That now, like, yeah, you automatically have a chevra.
Right.
In many cases, Then there's parties. Then there's, like I said, the juniors or the seniors, and you're only a freshman. The kind of like typical stuff, but like it makes sense if you weren't, like I don't know that I was unhappy. I came from like a loving home, but stuff was going on. Everyone has that.
Right.
You said plenty of people are fine and they make it through that. They're resilient. And so I relate a lot of it back to, and I think you just said it, is coping skills. Like you want to talk about a epidemic or a pandemic that we're going through, is today kids don't have coping skills, right?
Definitely seems that way.
And I think a lot of that, like, I know my mom won't like to hear this if she ends up listening to it. I think it comes from a place
She's going to listen.
I think it comes from a place of love.
Yeah.
Like my mom did it because internally she said, I remember feeling uncomfortable in these situations, so I want to make it easier for my kid.
Right.
But really, they were like the most successful generation because they didn't have it easy. Because their parents, whatever the trauma, whether it's the Holocaust or depressions or...
Right.
The most successful generation in history because they didn't have it easy. And that generation in return, out of love, said, I want to make it easier for my kid and provide them with going to private colleges, going to all these like different things that they didn't go through. And unfortunately, we're looking at possibly generations that are worse off than the previous, and that's not how it's supposed to go.
Yeah.
So I don't.
It's such an interesting thing because I listen to Joe Rogan all the time, quote him as much as possible. But I know he's like out with the Jews now, something like that. I don't know. I'm not fully up to date.
Related to Israel and maybe Bibi. I heard. I don't know.
Something
so bad.
Something happened. Yeah. I don't know. I'm not involved because I love his podcast. And he says that his favorite people are all people that went through really hard lives, like really hard lives. And then all those people made it, and now they're trying to give their kids the nicest, most comfortable life ever. And why are we trying to create? And that's what I'm doing as well. Like I'm really trying to give my kids whatever they can, just so that they don't have to suffer what I suffered or whatever. And meanwhile, that's what made me great.
Right.
Why am I doing that? It's an interesting thing.
Yeah, it's tough. So like I think at the simplest level, especially with little kids, and I'm far from a perfect parent. I've got 3, 8, 6, and 3, so they're all still little. Nice. Is just like it's okay to feel uncomfortable. Like if there's anything, and I'm far from perfect. My kids got technology, iPad, like whatever. I'm not
right.
to think I'm preaching, but like it's okay to have to go ask. The example I gave, and I don't know if I'm pretty sure it really happened. Back in the day when we were in school, you used to have to go to the library if you need to do a project because we didn't have Google, or you had to take out a book, and you're supposed to go ask the librarian for help, and my mom would do it for me.
Right.
These simple little things, because now we're seeing extreme versions of that. Kids have no responsibility, and we send them off to college or Israel for the year, and they can't handle it. When really it's not too hard, right? College isn't supposed to be that hard, especially from a dual curriculum background, but there's like real responsibility. No one's going to help you. No one's going to bail you out and do your work for you. And people are either turning to drugs or just depression, anxiety through the roof.
Right.
Suicide happens at those ages.
It's interesting because my sister, Sarah Asher, Dr. Sarah Asher.
That's the one you did the walk with?
No.
That's someone else.
Did you see that one?
Parts of it. I'm not.
Watch my podcast.
I know.
All right, fine.
I know, and I travel all the time. I go to Florida.
That was an awesome pod.
Yeah,
that was an awesome pod.
Cool idea.
But I'm actually talking about another sister who I have to tell the world I'm related to her because she's doing awesome things, but nobody knows. She's a dean in YU.
Okay.
And she's always telling me these interesting stories where like parents are freaking out, and she just says, "It's fine. Like it could be hard. Like maybe." Just let your kids experience the hardship of being alone, and like it's fine. Like she has a lot of those conversations.
Right. And I mean, now we're in like the next generation almost where your kids could be in college. So I don't even know where we're holding. Like mine are still young, but
yours are young.
But I could have. I don't know. I could have.
I have 3 kids past high school.
Yeah,
Just saying.
Yeah, it's.
Okay. It is, and life is very different. But I think maybe we're just pushing the years back. We live so long that like maybe, our 20s now 25, and I don't know. Could be. In the Torah, I'll just say this: people are having kids at like 250. So that means what were they partying until then? Like, maybe if we live longer, everything just stretches out. Okay. No, okay. So anyway, so you had this experience. So what made you want to change it? Well, go there and then you can go into your...
The consequences definitely helped.
Mm-hmm.
Like there was the fun stopped, right? When you have consequences, or also for clarity, I'm not a clinician. I'm not a professional. I mean, I'm a professional because I work in the business.
Right.
I don't come from a clinical background, but people tend to remind me I've got plenty of experience. So people ask me all the time, like, how do we know it's a problem, right? I don't have to tell you. Someone could drink once a week or someone could drink 7 days a week. One doesn't mean there's a problem.
Right.
Plenty of guys who do once a week have problems.
Right.
So I basically say, do you have consequences? If you have consequences of behavior and you keep doing it, I'd say we should probably look into this.
Right.
I had consequences. So, and also had, like I said, I had parents who cared about it and tried to, get me care, did the whole outpatient thing, but didn't buy into it. Periods of abstinence, could put things down for a couple of months at a time, thinking like that's the goal, but never like doing any like work.
Were the consequences coming from home or from life?
Both. So from life, and then that initial feeling was no longer there, right? So the anxiety that it took away of social settings, or the anxiety of like, where am I at in life, from going from arrived to now being like depressed, like this isn't what I thought I'd be doing. Like, all I'm doing is everything circling around, the drugs, the alcohol, and whatever that brought around it.
Right.
School was too much. I mean, I made it through. I went to a good Jewish private school, paid tuition, made it through.
Right. So where do the consequences come from? Where?
I'm saying, so my parents, there were consequences. I'd get caught. They didn't allow it.
Right.
There wasn't like, oh, you can do drugs and use our money, So there for sure was like some stealing from them and things like that, and hiding and getting caught. I had, I guess I already mentioned some car accidents. And I once was quoted saying an unusual amount of car accidents, and my good friend responded saying, I didn't know there was a usual amount of car accidents. Thank God no one hurt. It's kind of like stupid, I guess, stoner things, backing up different things into cars, or, thinking people still hold today that they're better drivers. Like, it's just not true. There's no way. Your reaction time is not the same if you're intoxicated.
No.
We tend to know that is illegal, but with weed, people have like blurred lines.
Right. Wait, so now you went through treatment, right?
Now I went, but it took me until the age of 23.
23.
So I was at a crossroads. Things were like pretty bad.
Right.
It circles back to what I'm doing today, but that took almost 15 years to see the similarity to like God's plan in life. I was actually back in Israel. So I had a at 23.
You went to treatment in Israel? No, okay.
I was back in Israel.
Yeah.
Right before. Kind of like, I had a wedding, kind of running away. Parents were like, we had some sort of like intervention financially. I was like, not in a good spot. I'm like, no, I'm going to Israel. And then for this wedding, don't worry about it. It'll be fine. And then I realized, oh my God, I can't go home because like life's a mess.
Right.
And I made an arrangement to like work on myself and stay in Israel. And I spent the next couple of months sitting with Rabbi Slavin in Neve.
Oh, nice.
Living with guys that are not using in Neve, like older guys, Shana Bet, Shana Gimel guys. Seeing a therapist.
Wait a minute, guys that were not using, you were part of that group? There was like a group, I can't...
No. It's not not any like recovery. They
were doing some sort of recovery thing. Oh, maybe that's different.
No, they weren't really. Yeah, this was 2007.
Okay, all
It's
right.
already a while ago. I don't think they had like any sort of program. It's just guys who are like, they weren't like sober, but they like, were
Not
moving
using.
on in life. Maybe
Right.
they were the guys that you described that
Okay.
use drugs and can stop, right?
Right.
Like had a good time.
Those are the worst.
Right, still belonged in a school like Neve where you could be who you want to be and
Right.
have a real kesher with a rabbi. And things were good, but I never really, I kind of went along with the motions of what I said I would do. Obviously, sitting with Rabbi Slavin for 2 months was amazing.
Yeah.
But
I got to get Rabbi Slavin on this.
Yeah.
Someone's got to warn me the next time he's in town.
Yeah.
Got to get warned.
Last few times I've been to Israel a lot recently. Last 2 times he was in America when I was in Israel.
Someone's got to tell me. I always find that after he
Me
leaves.
too, almost. Or it's my fault because I only reach out when I'm like about to go to Israel or on my way.
Just for the audience, just to say, there are certain people that are like the superstars in what they do. Rabbi Slavin has connected to more young people than almost anybody I've ever met in terms of like genuine awesomeness as a rabbi.
Very, very special man.
Oh,
And I had an amazing therapist, which I didn't know at the time. He actually passed away. He's
who was the therapist?
Avram Friedman, but there's more than one.
Right.
He was the older one, lived in Telstone. Not really in Neve at the time. Maybe
Was he the
Neve.
Mosh's brother? No. Who was that's another person. I remember there was a therapist. The Mosh's brother was a therapist.
He was a KSAC guy.
That would make sense. His name wasn't Friedman.
Yeah. No, but there's Avram Friedman, I think, or I'm pretty sure.
Avram Friedman's running the now.
Yeah, exactly. Not him.
That's not him. He's young.
Yeah, he passed away of cancer, but he, I guess it was one of the first times where he just probably like the way you would operate, kind of just like met me where I'm at.
Right.
Created some boundaries. He's like, okay, if this doesn't work, you're making a deal. You'll willingly go to treatment.
Right.
And it happened. Didn't work.
Shocking.
Kind of went home for Pesach that year.
I was like, what happened?
Right. We went home for So actually, it's interesting. So Purim's coming up, so maybe I should mention what we did. At the time, I didn't know what he did, but he took something almost out of the big book, which everyone thinks is like maybe hardcore in its ways, but it's really everything. I shouldn't say these words, but I'm going to say it anyways. I think everything is a form of harm reduction, even getting sober through the 12th step. Like we all try things and get there. That's harm reduction, right? I tried my own way. That gets a bad rap because harm reduction maybe means using and not being sober and this.
Right.
But like we all, when you eventually stay sober, you've probably done some form of harm reduction on your own.
Right.
Well,
I love what he did. I just want to say what he did, and you said it's something that you would do, and you're 100% right.
Yeah, I know.
The idea is that he's not an idiot.
Right.
He knew you needed treatment the day he met you.
Yeah.
But that's what I think. I don't know the guy.
Yeah, for sure.
He knew it.
Consequences, I needed it.
But to try to do something that someone doesn't want because you know it's right is usually insanity.
Correct, but I get a lot now. Oh, can't you not help them till they're ready to get help? So that's not true because he did help me, even though I wasn't ready to get.
You
help.
can help,
right? But like I said earlier, people love extremes. Oh, you can't send him. There is something called therapeutic interventions. He did one on me.
That's right.
So Purim was coming up. So I got sober in May.
Wait. I'm backing up a second. I know you're not a therapist, but a lot of the stuff you're saying, I don't even know that I know this guy, and I'm in love already, and I know he passed away.
Sorry. I called him when I was 10 years sober, thank God.
Oh, really? Okay. That's nice.
He remembered details.
Because you're saying something very, very special. Because the concept in therapy and in addiction is you can't help someone until they want help, and that's what you were saying. And there's some truth to it.
Yeah, of course.
But it's the biggest lie ever.
I
What I'm saying
I hear it all the time.
It's such a lie.
Like, shouldn't we not send him? I'm like, well, you can help him. We can motivate people.
Right. What I'm saying is there's a lot of work you could do with someone who's not ready. I remember I sat down with a client.
That's where the word harm reduction is great because that's what that means to me.
I mean, you could use the word harm reduction or not. You could just say you give someone a holding space where they could be and you hold them and let them know that you're there for them. They will make the right decisions ultimately. That's what I believe.
I don't want to go into it, but that's what's so cool about the model that we adapted in Israel.
No, go into it. I'm sorry.
Because if you're in Israel
and
you're not sure, we'll let you come into outpatient. We have a pre-contemplative track.
Right.
So we're using this, and this really was developed by Menachem Poznansky, who helps us, God thankfully helps us on this project from like
Right.
a clinical framework component and other things, is we meet people where they're at with certain guidelines. Ultimately, most of those cases belong in residential, but I can't put a guy in my residential program that's not willing to be there. Like,
Right.
we don't lock people
Oh,
up.
so let me ask you a question. So okay, the important thing is I know other programs that are doing something like that, but they have very strict rules. You got to be sober. Is that the
So,
rule? Because I'm saying
We have
to be in the outpatient, I'm saying.
we have a lowest level track that's not going to look like an outpatient schedule. We're dealing with a case like that right now, where as long as you're willing to work on behaviors, right? So
Yeah.
it might mean still drinking alcohol, but your problem is, on Shabbos, but we've identified your problem as a different substance. So we call it like a pre-contemplative IOP track.
Right.
And we have that. We've had some
That
successful
is
cases.
very
Yeah.
unique.
Right, but I can't in good conscience tell you to get on a plane to come to that track.
Gotcha.
Because what do now you're going to be 6,000 miles away. But fortunately or thankfully or unfortunately, a lot of people are in Israel already that need that. Whether they're there for gap year, whether they've gone back, whether they've made Aliyah with their wife and their baby.
Right.
And we've seen, almost every age, more or less, And
So that's super unique. That's really, really
it's
cool.
really cool. But it also allows us to, we had a guy was not a fit for residential.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. He came because he yesed his parents. Maybe it was to get to Israel, which also helps us get guys to agree to come because we're in Israel and a lot of
Right.
people want to be in Israel. I say for the wrong reason, but hopefully the right outcome. They end up staying in treatment.
Right.
We've been successful at that. It doesn't really matter sometimes why you go, as long as you're not going to change your mind and be disruptive.
Right.
So this guy was disruptive, and now we're working on a plan where he can, it's the family's responsibility, stay with family, stay on his own, and he has to work his way back, he's into our IOP or a higher level. We could do PHP, which is really residential. You just don't live with us.
Right.
And on this topic, we can create families and people can create boundaries that help a person come to treatment. I'm not talking about kicking everyone out and, throwing them in the gutter, but depending on the case, families need to,
Okay.
be part of it.
So let's go back to your story. Your story you're saying is at this point you're going to treatment.
Right. Well, right. Rabbi Friedman, or help me see.
Right. He
Yeah,
gave
so-
you the space to make that
He
decision.
gave me the space. I progressed. I mean, I did not stay sober.
Mm-hmm.
Couldn't control my drinking. He
Right.
said, he knew I was going to drink on Purim. That's the only reason I mentioned it. I mean, I don't identify more with the substances than the alcohol, but I needed something.
Right.
So I wasn't using the substances. It's Purim. So he knew no matter what he said. I mean, I know this now. I was going to drink, right? So he said, well, if you're going to drink, not that he told me to drink, because he remembered he actually had a resentment that he thought I told someone that he told me to drink. Maybe I did.
Oh.
Anyways, so that's why I thank God I called him at 10 years sober. He remembered it.
Oh, wow.
Okay, he said, if you're going to drink, try to drink a half bottle, which is out of the big book a little bit. You want to try control drinking? Go. Try to have one drink,
Give it a shot.
Yeah, and I failed.
Yeah.
It was a very typical yeshivish blackout Purim type of, 2 days of Purim type of thing. And
It's
it was not
very
successful.
interesting you're mentioning Purim because
Yeah.
Purim is what people don't realize, the hugest trigger. We're actually in our village right now, giving a little plug.
Yes,
We're
I've
doing
seen
the
it.
Sober
It's
Fest.
really cool.
We're making like the biggest sober Purim party
Really
ever.
awesome. Like,
We're
enough
so
that I'm
stoked.
gonna figure out how to go out of my way
And get there?
and get there. Hopefully,
Sweet.
I have
Have
some
you-
shaykhs to Lakewood, which is also really tough in the late at night. So
It's very hard. So I'm saying it's hugely difficult for the Jewish community. I'm
yeah. I
saying
mean, I
it's-
can't. Yeah, it's very tough. I don't. I
Yeah.
mean, thank God I don't. I understand it, but thank God that's not one of my problems today. You
Right.
know, being in long-term recovery and having done some work,
Right.
I can definitely be around it, but it's not fun. I mean, it's a problem even for people that don't have a.
This is one of the things you find out is you just don't like being around drunks when they're drunk after walks.
Yeah, I mean,
They're not fun anymore.
no.
They're not fun. It's only fun if you're drunk with them.
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't.
And
So wait, I want to know.
Yeah, so-
I want to know how your story gets you into this industry
So,
and like.
right. So after I went to treatment later that year, but it was also I was back sitting in his office,
Yeah.
and you hear this a lot in recovery, and sort of sat down. It took another month or two because it was May already. I mean, we went from Purim to May.
Right.
And I went back to Israel, and we're sitting there, and he's like, dude, what happened? Like, he just knew, or maybe I admitted it. I guess not hate. I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired, as you hear a lot. And I admitted to whatever I was doing. And he said to me, well, you made a deal with your dad, with your parents. And Rabbi Silver was actually involved in that indirectly initially. I forgot to mention that because he was in Israel for the wedding.
Right.
And it's like, you said you'd go to treatment. And I, like, basically what I remember is I picked up the phone and surrendered. I'm like, okay, I'm ready to go to treatment.
Wow.
And I was in treatment within like 36 hours back in America.
That's a move.
From a Wednesday to a Friday.
You got to grab it one day.
Yeah, well, so
Yeah.
part of what, and it relates back to Israel is, so part of what we struggle with, I think most people who are in pain and wanting to get help, but we're like focused on like stuff that doesn't matter, like what do people think?
Right.
The community, my friends, family. I learned today, not that people don't care, but no one was really worried, like, what's David Mosberg up to? Like, I didn't have a wife and kids, like,
right.
My parents were. But, like, and you have stigma from communities, which unfortunately still exists. We've made lots of improvement. Right?
Yeah.
It really depends. I'm not sure my mom really loved the idea either, right? Because who wants to have to answer where their kid is? So being in Israel, in my brain, allowed me to say to myself, well, everyone in Israel thinks I'm going home, and everyone at home thinks I'm in Israel. Wow. So it allowed me to surrender. And I think we have that opportunity with allowing people now to go to treatment in Israel. Because they just say, I'm going to Israel. People don't really ask questions.
Right.
If you're going to Israel. Even if you're like a little older. If you're older, they know your life's a little bit of
They
a
ask
mess.
questions when when they don't get 2 blue checks on WhatsApp.
Right.
That's where the questions start.
Right.
Wait a minute. This guy says he's going to Israel, but I'm not getting 2 blue checks. This guy does not have his phone. He's in rehab.
Yeah. So I don't want to go into that. Not that people have their phones. It really depends on who they are and if they really need a phone.
Right.
But we have the ability to also meet people where they're at when it comes to that stuff. But we force them, a little bit. Week, 2 weeks, just Fridays, but
right.
really, really individualized. But so went to treatment, had it really good, came back after a couple of months, which I obviously wasn't planning on. But I came back home.
So what was your experience in treatment? Because, I mean, you're, like, steeped in this topic, big time.
At the time, I wasn't. It's interesting.
Right, so I want to know what your experience
was. When I got into the business side of it, the only thing I knew about treatment was my treatment experience.
Right.
Which is which we'll get into, right? So it changed drastically later because I thought it was, like, the best treatment experience, money could buy. I mean, it was expensive, right? Went to Karen.
Right.
Pennsylvania, and the first month I was in a really, once again, I relate it more to people than necessarily overall treatment centers, but it's a great place, helped lots of people.
Right.
I believe it helped. I stayed sober ever since, so clearly it played a role in it.
Yeah.
I've learned there's a lot more than just treatment, There's where they go afterwards. We're sitting in one of these places.
Right.
Probably more important than where you go sometimes, and I could show you our treatment planning for Israel, in Genesis in Israel and in Florida, which I didn't talk about, but that's not a Jewish program per se. We take this into consideration from day one because we could do the greatest work, but we send you home,
right?
Good luck.
I could say we have one of your guys here, and he's a rock star.
Yeah, well, so the unique thing about that is, so I was in more of, we'll refer to it as the middle of nowhere, right? Outside of Reading, Pennsylvania, can't really get anywhere. So that was very typical. First 30 days, it was kind of cutting edge, and the guy that ran it also passed away. His name was Tom Ditzler. Anyone who's been through the Karen organization knows the name.
Passed away recently?
Yeah, a couple of years. Yeah, he was sick for a long time. But he ran the young adult male program. Karen was the first treatment center to create a program for those ages, 18 to 25. Because this is just an interesting tidbit, which I didn't know I would care about. Right. I learned it then, but being in the industry now, is because the ages of 18 to 25, statistically, didn't stay in treatment. Why? Because they either were put with adolescents, which has existed for a very long time, because from a business standpoint, parents sign you in and you can't leave.
Right.
We could create, back then, you could just create the program and, like, you don't have to, like, do much. Not that they didn't. I'm just saying, like, it existed. And then adult programs existed for however many years, 50, 70 years. So as an 18, 19, 23-year-old, when I was put with adolescents, if I would have been like, I hate these guys. Like, they're kids.
Right.
When I was with adults, the adults were like, who are these 22-year-old punks, And they didn't stay. They left treatment. They ran off, whatever they did.
Right.
So to give Karen credit where credit's due, they said, we're going to do it. Like, people are like, but you're crazy. How are you going to, like, keep people? And they tapped this guy to please be the director. He was already working for them, and throughout the years, he was running their relapse unit, which is obviously a little bit more serious, I guess. And he was like one of the first people to realize that he had certain demands if they wanted him to do it. And one of the things which I think me and you could resonate is community. He's like, we need to create community.
Right.
Like, these guys are not going to stay because legally we can't force them to stay. So they created more of that, like, peer. I don't know what the term is exactly, but, like, everyone's actions not affected, but, like, it was a lot of, like, peer. Can't think of the word. Like, like, there were some consequences, but from a very loving place. Wanted you to have fun. Typically in 30-day treatment centers, they didn't take you off campus.
I have such an interesting story about this, and you're going to continue because I also have some cool stuff to say about Karen that's interesting. But I dealt with, it seems so obvious to anybody listening that you would want to make it enjoyable as possible to be in a program like this. But it is so not happening.
Right. It's also hard.
It's very, very hard.
I mean, you're talking about people who don't want to be there.
Yeah.
Now you can start taking them out.
But I remember I dealt with a program. I was working with adolescents. They were yelling and screaming at me, like, why are you not sending me guys? Right. I said, because you're a miserable place to go to.
Oh, yeah.
I'm miserable.
Very careful with adults. As much as careful as I am with where to recommend adults to, we take adolescents much more serious, and the list is very short.
Yeah. But you got to make it party time. I don't mean to say it that way. It better be wonderful.
Right.
And you got to build this community. So this guy, Tom, really knew what he was talking about.
Yeah. Trips. Like, they're like, you're crazy.
That's crazy. Like in a rehab?
Within the first week, 2 weeks.
Right.
They had Rabbi Lipsker, so that helped my parents. I got to go to Friday night dinner by him. All these things helped.
Rabbi Lipsker's the parent whisperer.
Yeah, well, he's the rabbi.
Yes.
He also has a cool story. God just put him there. He didn't know that Karen existed. So he was sent to Reading, Pennsylvania.
Yeah, I'm going to get him on, too.
Yeah. So, and then after that, I was fortunate enough just to stay up there, meaning up on that campus. A lot of people were sent down to Florida. And that model of the next 3 months, it was 1 month and 3 months, was a little bit of real life. What do I mean by that? Like, you had time to yourself. You weren't just busy from morning to night, which the first 30 days were. Sit with your thoughts. Start to go home on weekends.
Do you know they canceled that?
Yeah, now it's like...
Did you know that?
Yeah, it's like 1 month or 2.
It's so sad.
Kind of like whatever you'll...
The extended care was so good.
Yeah. Well, right, so... And it was a blend of a model. Like, you still didn't have, like, freedoms. Like, your car was parked in the parking lot, but you didn't have the keys.
Right.
If you wanted to go home, whenever you had your weekend pass, but... I went to a wedding, like somewhere in D.C. from a family friend, went home, met Menachem, met Yudi. Like,
that's how you met them? Like, while you were in Karen still?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And that was my discharge plan. I was very fortunate, and it worked. Like, I went back to the beginnings of the Jewish recovery community. I mean, you remember it maybe even better than I do, but it was small. The living room thing God already existed.
It's tiny.
Under Menachem.
I was just talking about in the last podcast, like, it did not exist before the living room.
We also didn't understand, like, that it was part of our place. I mean, I was a Five Towns kid, and Menachem was, and we used to drive to then it was the old flower shop storefront on, like, Nostrand or whatever.
Nostrand, yeah.
And we're like, but there's, like...
There was one on Quentin, but I think it was after that. Yeah.
But there was also one before, maybe. I don't know. Anyways, we didn't understand, like, 5 of us were from the 5 towns. We're like, why are we even in Brooklyn? Like, what did I know? Like... Okay, without our place in Brooklyn, the thing wouldn't exist. So
I think they just coming out of the closet as being part of our place. This is new. This is new and exciting.
New? Well, maybe you helped.
Yeah.
And the rest was history.
I did help, I think, because of our village.
Yes, I agree. And then we had a couple. I had it good. I just engaged in the recovery community, went to meetings, had it pretty easy. I had recovery jobs. I worked with family.
How important was the living room in this process? In this aftercare process?
So I'll give another shot, because what I've learned we could plan all we want, and someone could give you a discharge plan, but if there's no follow up and something goes wrong, you just don't go to that first meeting.
Yeah.
And you might never go to the next one. So thank God I went to the first meeting, and there were a couple of guys who were going to the living room. Although I knew, I was seeing Yudi at the time.
Right.
He loves to remind me that, which is crazy in and of itself.
Yeah. Can we say who Yudi is?
Yeah,
Yudi Wiener.
Yeah, Yudi.
I'm saying he's a legend in the field right now.
He's actually working by Genesis.
Yeah.
He also works a little bit part time by Rabbi Fisher.
He does. Yeah.
I
just saw him.
He was actually my therapist then. That was my discharge.
That's
you want to talk about miracles?
Yeah.
Because I'll joke around about that and the living room. But at that first meeting I went to in the 5 towns AA meeting, a couple of the guys, so Usher Weissman. I should have said that.
Yeah, I don't know if we should say names.
Yeah, okay. Anyways, so you'll
but these guys are professionals now.
Yeah. So anyway, so someone said, "Hey, come to the living room."
Right.
And I'm not so sure when you ask that question. I'm not so sure. Without that extra community, if I would have stayed sober.
Right.
As much as I say treatment, did I really do therapy and treatment? I don't know. You know what I mean? First 4 months, it was good. It kept me sober, I guess. But engaging in the community, dealing with real life, going home, going to meetings, going to the living room, whatever struggles went on, and staying sober. That's where the real work happened.
Right.
Like in Sober Living or Our Village. So we tried to take all those experiences, and blend that into a treatment program. But to answer your question, so a bunch of years went by, and I was at a crossroads, I was working with family, doing I had some experience in healthcare, working in healthcare. The gig was coming to an end, and I was well, what next? I was always a doer, right? I was very involved in the living room, fundraising for different non-for-profits. If I'm involved, I like to get stuff done. I don't really think about it. I just do it. Right. Sort of how I live my life. It's a little scary sometimes. Because like you said, apparently I'm doing things the hard way. And I
you are.
Yeah, and I am. And that's why. Because I don't necessarily, I just do. But it works. I mean, I'm pretty happy. And
so how, okay, so, you're in a crossroads.
So I just said, and I was with my dad was always very involved in what I'm doing. And I'm just okay, I went to treatment. It was successful. We need to do more for the community because, I don't know, there's, nothing. Where do people go, even in Long Island, at the time?
Right.
Even until today, there's no real outpatient or anything like that. And started speaking to the few people I knew, that might have some advice. And someone introduced me to this idea of sober living and to a guy who was doing it already in California and in New York City. And long story short, because it's just a long story, I ended up with a, what I would like to say, a pretty comprehensive, high-level female sober living in New York City.
I remember you doing that.
And that's where I used the term, I'd say the experience was priceless. That's where I learned the good, the bad, and the ugly.
But you paid the price.
Yeah, paid
it's
the price.
Priceless, but you paid the price.
I paid the price. Financially, whatever, it was okay.
What was so hard about it? I remember it was a challenge.
Yeah.
I remember
so I went into an industry that, relies on, basically you rely on treatment centers to some extent, right? You hope to be not the first step, the second step for people. And there was a lot more to this business side of it that unfortunately I couldn't have imagined because I only went to one treatment center and it worked. And I figured if you have a good product, they'll just send you people.
Right.
And it's a lot more complicated than that.
It's so much more complicated.
Much more. And I sat there trying to figure it out. That's where a lot of my ideas and philosophies came from. Out of frustration, sitting there. I ended up getting, we focused very heavily on mental health, and I had, 1 or 2 decent referral sources. I also it involved too much from me personally, 24/7, and I couldn't necessarily hire anyone at a high level.
So let me ask you a question. Because I have a lot of frustration around this. So,
Sorry, I'm going to do this.
Okay, there's so many people opening programs and
Right.
doing the work. I believe that if you make the best program, they're going to come. That's what I believe, right?
Yeah,
Because I'm naive.
Right. That is that.
Now-
And that is a concept, right? If you build it, they will come to some extent. Yeah.
Why does that not happen? From a business
Yeah,
perspective,
I'll be honest, Sonny. That's one of the reasons I'm even here today, right? Because you're a guy that might have some influence in sending people to treatment,
right?
and I have a program that I think more people should be coming to. I mean, we've put our blood, sweat, and tears into this program. After learning, after my experiences with the city program and closing down, going to help. I worked for Onward Living for a little bit, like as true mission. I was COVID, and I'm like, okay,
Right.
I can go, and left. My wife was home. It was easier.
Right.
My wife's home, and I still travel.
No, but why? Because parents are calling me all day, and they're going to different programs.
Well, that's the thing.
And
So I said to you,
I know some programs that are like, this program is phenomenal. It's a great program, but I can't. They're calling me. I can't get people. What is happening? What is happening that it shouldn't it be that if you're the best program, people are coming to you?
people, listen, I get it. People are hesitant to trust at first. So that's a very tough period to make it through, right? We've been fortunate, like I hinted to earlier. The fact that we're in Israel helps people come.
Right.
They don't even necessarily do the due diligence they should
Right.
because we're in Israel. And we knew that from our own experiences. We all secretly want to be in Israel or openly want to be in Israel. It was the middle of COVID. We couldn't even get to Israel when this God decided we should create this program, and Rabbi Harlab told some of that story.
Right.
So thankfully people are coming, right? But they're not coming from all the places I think they should. It takes time. And people are hesitant because we're not the first program to say we're doing certain things. So I think people...
Right. I'm asking this question from such frustration. It probably is coming. To me, when you're thinking about a program, it should just be like, okay, how well do they do? But I find
So how do you measure that?
that people are measuring it by
Marketing?
do NFL players go to your program? Do that's
Right. So it's actually really cool. So once again, I mean, it's not a secret that because I have another program where we're doing amazing work. We do outpatient in Florida for the general community. Happy to work with Jews, non-Jews. We have a specialty OCD program, but we do mental health outpatient. But without that program, Israel wouldn't exist. So I believe it's all, God wants it to exist.
Right.
But it's because people equate, and to some extent it can be true, with how much you pay. Does that mean the care is better? So a lot of places, not that the community can afford it, the ones that charge like those big dollars, executive type treatment centers, they do give very personalized care. So you are getting more than the fancy house because usually they don't need to treat 30 people, they just need to treat 5. Logic would tell me they can provide more comprehensive care, but although those cases are also more complicated, that's like another topic.
Right.
Because if you have extreme wealth and and no one could hold boundaries on you, you need a team of 5 instead of and 5 clients than being one of 30. In Israel, we really blend that. We're not charging for the executive program. We're not. It's nice, but it ain't a mansion. It's just a new construction building in Yerushalayim, like
Right.
apartments. But our care in the clinic is really individualized, but it's hard to do.
Right.
We're trying to leverage a low cost model that we know works. But people need.
No,
to
because
support it.
I let's say running this program, I keep running up against things like maybe I should just add things that I don't even agree with because people are very impressed with that stuff. Like the enormous, like I'm in a sober living level.
Right.
Blah, blah, blah.
Right, yeah.
And I believe that we're going out, we're gonna get them work, and they're gonna do all their treatment at night, but most of rehab saying, listen, if it's not all day long IOP or PHP, then I don't want to send to you. I'm saying,
we talked about it
where's
earlier.
your numbers?
Right. We talked about it earlier, maybe before we were on air, like that whole discharge planning in these larger treatment centers.
Right.
It's tough for them. So the minute they hear, like, you don't have your own outpatient, I feel like their brains turn off.
They turn off.
So we have the opposite in Florida. We don't have housing. We just have outpatient.
Right.
Because after my experience in New York, I said, I'm never doing residential without clinical. New York's a little bit different than Muncie. We were at the mercy of all these outpatients.
Right.
And trying to have 10 clients and 8 different outpatients when really they're our responsibility. Meaning the house, you.
Right.
They're much more your responsibility. I don't care what outpatient they're in. They live here.
That's right.
Right? So if they have to pay a lot for outpatient, then how can you afford to give good care in your house? Because we have to consider the money, right? Everyone's money is somewhat limited.
So how could you help people when money is the objective? Like what you were saying before, that a business, I don't know if we're on the air or not, but you're saying a business.
Well, I believe if you have a business plan in place, right, with checks and balances, is it hard to keep everyone's motives straight, right? Like at the end of the day, have partners, have investors.
Right.
No one likes to keep writing checks. So we got to make some money, right? We got to. So it's a low cost model. We have not worked in much profit, which is maybe a crazier discussion. We hope to make it maybe other places.
Right.
Right. But we just know we've put in too much work. We need to make sure it's sustainable. A lot of good people have come before us in the strictly Jewish treatment environment.
Right.
You know, and so we just said, out of a good place, we want to stick with the for-profit model. That means on paper, things like are supposed to work.
Right.
Try to keep everyone's intentions in check. We are here to help. I believe they can go hand in hand. We need to make money to help. We need to help to make money, right? And they can stay sort of straight. That can happen in the non-for-profit model. I mean, I think today our place is our village is sustainable.
Right.
So you've figured it out through trial and error, like the rest of us. So we're at a place. We came up with a very low-cost model to come to treatment in Israel. Number one, we know you need time, so you need a couple of months, and we also don't want to waste any time. I'm not saying anyone waste time in treatment.
What does that mean? What does that mean?
So I think I hinted to it earlier. It's like, so you have different models of treatment that sort of test boundaries.
Right.
Right. So is there a place, and is there a need to be in the desert or up on the mountain in Utah, Colorado? Yes, but like, I believe time, I said it earlier, have my personal mission statement is we don't want to waste anyone's time or money, and you might have a year and $1 million. We still need to take both those things into consideration.
Right.
So anything I'm involved with is we mix as much real world as possible from day one. What do I mean? We don't have a campus model in Israel, but it's still residential level of care. Every day, you're supervised, but you're leaving the house, walking through Yerushalayim,
right,
5 minutes past the bar. I think there's some sort of THC tea bar now. I don't think it's really. They have some sort of gimmick because it's not legal in Israel yet. And these guys walk by it successfully. And if they're not going to walk by it successfully, I'm going to find out in the first few weeks instead of 6 months later when they're first coming back to a place like Muncie.
Right.
And now they can't go back to treatment because they already devoted 6 months of their brain time, even if the family has the money. Like, not everyone will say yes to treatment 100 times. So
I have that a lot with people. It's like they ask me, should I go back to treatment? It's like, hey, I'm like, what else are you going to learn in the next? You've been to 20 programs.
Right. Well, a lot of them just did the same thing.
Right.
So it's not their fault. It's not the client's fault.
Yeah.
I don't even blame the treatment centers. Like I said, we all end up somehow in these positions, and sometimes it's a good.
So what are you doing differently based on your experience?
We adapted a model that exists heavily in Florida or different places or New Jersey, right? Crossroads does a little bit of it, where you leave on a daily basis. You're just supervised. The difference is we're able to, because we're small, we're able to keep it individualized, and you don't have to drive in Yerushalayim. So guys get more and more freedoms as appropriate. Level systems. I'm sure you have something here when guys first come in. Very similar. We're blending in the Our Village model early on when appropriate.
Right.
And not waiting 6 months to say, oh, now this guy's got to move out. I mean, we have treatment planning going on where termination or discharge is, it's talked about from, the minute it's appropriate. So just really, really, I don't know. We're trying to be the best there is, as crazy as
I know that you're not in charge of all the clinical stuff,
Yeah.
but what would you say that is from your experience? Like, you were like, hard line, this is how we're doing it because I've seen it not work other ways. Like, what are things that you've been part of that?
Well, me and Aaron Levine, who's my business partner.
Right. Awesome dude.
Yeah, we got lucky. Like, I believe we didn't go through the whole story. I mean, Rabbi Charlap, like I said, mentioned we got lucky. I mean, Menachem introduced us to Rabbi Charlap, so I think indirectly he planned for this to happen with God's help.
Right.
And then me and Aaron circled back to Menachem and we're like, basically, can you supervise us as owners? Because at the end of the day, we will be pressured by finances.
Right.
It's what you're worried about, what you'd speak about. And we got lucky. And so that's how our relationship professionally started with Menachem. Like, we want to defer to you,
right,
before we make decisions. Sometimes, like, everyone needs supervision.
Yeah,
right. Do
you realize how rare that is?
Yes.
That the owners are getting supervision.
So I'll tell you when I tell you how I learned about supervision. Mm-hmm. It's all God. At the end of my New York City sober living phase, the living room came into a really good spot through our place. And I think it's when they got involved a little bit. They have some Oasis.
They got some grants.
And they said, part of the budget was for marketing. But very different type of marketing. So Menachem tapped me to help because I was very involved from peripheral.
Right.
And it was just to let people know the living room doesn't need anything from anyone, right? No one pays to come.
Right.
So just to let more people know from a very altruistic standpoint, the living room exists. But I also then learned, which it's the chachma behind it, when you're a member of the living room, you don't realize what's going on behind the scenes.
Right.
You guys just had a whole, you correct me if I'm wrong, had a whole, basically staff conference, right? Building, whatever you guys did there.
Yeah.
So I learned about all this stuff, Menachem and Gittel, and I had to have supervision. I'm like, what? I'm like, just doing some marketing for you. And I had supervision with Gittel, on a weekly basis. I mean, it was, and then as I started hiring clinicians, I realized that you could be the most talented clinician in the world. To work in a treatment center is very different. Okay. Hopefully you are as good as we thought you were.
Right.
I don't want to go into that. And I realized how important that was. Now, the supervision turned into, after a little time, Menachem really taking a little bit more of a pivotal role in building the clinical programming.
Right.
With my clinical director and program director, and we've had some changes over the last few months, but once again, we really evaluated. We didn't it's very hard. We're hiring really dedicated people. Everyone that we've hired has been amazing. There are people who have made Aliyah, dedicated themselves to living in Israel, dedicated themselves to the helping professions, and we had to make some changes, which isn't easy.
So what happens to them?
But I credit that to the business model. We had no choice. I had to put feelings aside, and in order to make sure I had the best program, and someone like for Menachem to agree to keep working for me,
right,
was to make some changes. And I had to, switch people's positions, and that's not always so easy.
Because the business model.
No, because the program was not as good as we planned it to be. I needed better staff in different positions.
So you're believing that the business model is if you make the best program for the right price, then people will come.
Yeah. But it's not so simple, which goes back to our frustrations.
Right.
Because I thought I did that in the city, and it was a lot tougher than I thought.
Right.
We've been fortunate enough here. People are coming. Should more be coming already? We've almost opened a year. Yeah, I think so. With the way the program is today.
So what is in the industry? How do they get people to come? I'm asking you a question because I want to know.
It's someone's full-time job, which is really tough as a startup. Like, how do you afford an employee whose only job it is to get business? So guys like me and you, as the people in charge, take it on, and we can't really do it that well.
No, I
do terribly.
I got to
worry about who's paying who, the money, this. I'm talking to families. I mean, because it's much more important to me and Aaron that we're hand-holding discharge, admissions and speaking to families and getting them in, which is also a full-time job. But, like, that's much harder to hand off. In my program in Florida, I just hired someone after a year to do it, to be calling therapists all day.
I feel like in the Jewish community, it's even more because there's 1,000 cooks in every single situation.
It's very tough.
It's not like you have a salesman show up.
There's a lot of great organizations doing this work.
Right.
And they have their methods, and it just, I don't know. It's frustrating at times, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And people have the best intentions. They mention other programs, try this, try that, and they don't realize.
No, I had recently somebody from an organization that said, I'm not sending to you because I don't like your method. Now, that might be true, but why would the method matter when it comes to success? That's my question. Like,
right, so that's
where do you get your...
Right, so, like, my plan is today to, like, show you in black and white, this is what we're doing.
Right.
Show me who else is doing it. And for the price. And for the Jewish community. Because there are people doing it. It might be $60,000 for 45 days. Right? I'm charging $12,900 for 28 days. Like, I mean, I hinted, it's very trauma-informed, mental health-focused care. So,
right.
But so outcomes, yeah, we have them. I mean, we're still new. I actually was just asking someone to, like, give it to me because people like numbers, but I could show you treatment plans, schedules, like.
Right. Well, you're new, but what is the plan? What is the plan for people post treatment and post you? How long do they stay by you?
So depending on, once again, it's somewhat individualized. I will not tell someone. Well, I should actually. It's changed because we've adapted and we've have a new cool program for guys that are looking to do more trauma-focused care that might already be in recovery but are struggling.
Right.
And you are familiar with a lot of that. And we've created a new trauma intensive program. We use the term brief, and we're talking 3 to 4 weeks. In the U.S., that means 3 to 5 days. I'm not saying I don't believe in it. I don't have so much experience. I've never been to a 3 to 5 day trauma intensive, but I've seen people misusing it, like trying to go to solve something that's bigger than that. So we've created a very individualized program where they're intertwined into our regular residential schedule with much more one-on-one time with our, trauma-informed clinicians. So we're doing that today. But to answer your question, if there's a typical client like I would have been, right, like that typical drug user or misuser,
right,
try to stay away from those old terms. Right. 3 months is like sort of like a first stage, like 90 days. We'll step you down if you could stay, assuming someone has the time to stay in Israel, they're in yeshiva, have to leave yeshiva, or they're in America, want to get on a plane.
Right.
So
okay, so let me stop because
months.
we're gonna have to stop. I want to ask you a couple of more questions. Hold on. This one is like you've watched, and you alluded to it before. You've watched program after program in the Jewish world opening up.
Yeah.
How many have you seen close? I've seen plenty. Let's just say.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I didn't focus on that. Like my brain was in the regular treatment community, and we could help Jews.
So that's the thing, right?
Yeah.
No, your model works. Meaning you make a regular treatment program, and you also help Jews.
Right.
That works. But you opened something in Israel that was purely for Jews that are. Why do you think it's going to work? I mean, say like I said,
what's
wrong with you?
Right, but we knew personally, and I said it before, that people want to go to Israel. So treatment is something that people have a hard time.
There are programs in Israel that I cannot get anybody to go.
Well, that's because of the type of program they are.
Maybe
the reputation has.
But I'm saying it. I'm saying when I opened this, the sober living, I mean, everybody was like, "What the heck are you doing?" Like it was really like.
Well, so that's
even my team were like, "What the heck are you doing?"
That's the problem. You need like years, and most people don't have years.
They don't have years.
Right.
I've watched so many programs
did nothing
open
wrong besides
and close.
running out of funding.
They ran out of funding.
Well,
I mean, they might have done things wrong.
No,
but what did they do wrong?
But people are hesitant to send to new programs, and at a certain point, people need to get over that, I guess, because you can't expect even non-Jewish treatment programs. Like if no one will send you someone for your first 2 years, well, how are you gonna ever make it?
Right.
But thankfully, there's some people that trusted in us, You know, whether it was the family or a referent,
Right.
you know, that we have the right intentions. Thankfully, like you said, I have our first client is in our village. So
Right.
that means we have a success story right away off the bat.
He's
Today would have looked a
amazing.
little different as our program changed, yeah, but I don't regret a minute of his stay. It was maybe a little long, but he was happy to be there. We have a more, you know, organized process today for guys.
Right.
They would probably come here, you know.
No, what I'm saying is that, like, I have you analyzed why all these programs have failed?
Well, like I said, so maybe they didn't have the business model, and then even if they did, people didn't send them business. I mean, it's an unfortunate part of it, right?
Right.
If someone
Right.
doesn't give you business. So the Jewish community is definitely savvy and tries to be careful, so they go to professionals
Right.
or organizations that do this. We are sidestepping that a little bit sometimes because we are in Israel.
Gotcha.
It
She's
might be a
seeing it as
weakness
a
of
major
people.
advantage.
Yeah. Listen, I went to treatment because I could tell people I was in Israel.
Right.
This was like it made sense to we have a business partner that didn't really know anything about it. He's like, oh, that makes there's sort of like logic in it.
Gotcha.
Jews will like to say if you're of the age of 18 to 23 and you have to tell your friend or your father, right? Maybe your parent, the grandfather. Yeah, David went back to Israel. I assume he went back to Neve. I did go back to, like
Right.
people go back to Israel.
So there's an advantage.
So we've had some of that. Slowly but surely, the professionals are seeing the work. You know, it takes time.
Right.
I've gotten good feedback. Thankfully, at least the ones that don't like it try to be honest. There's nothing more frustrating than hearing, like, 6 months later, oh, we didn't send anyone because of that person you hired. And I'm like, thanks for telling me.
Yeah, right?
And that happens.
That does happen, by the
Yeah.
way. That really happens.
It's a
And
little
I've
scary.
had places that I've sent to because I love the one or two people that are there, and then they leave, and I'm like, okay, that was a nice program.
Right, but maybe it's still a good program.
It might
So
be,
We're guilty of it also.
right?
Yeah, it came
No,
up
we're
early.
definitely guilty.
Well, it's hard because if we can't trust people, who can we trust, right? Like, these are large systems.
Right.
I'm happy to send to a treatment center. I don't even have such strict guidelines as people would think. As long as they're going to communicate with me if I sent the person there, right?
Yeah.
I know they're going to provide basic 28-day care.
Right.
They're gonna consider discharge, come back to me if I'm the referent, include the family. Like it's not so complicated the beginning of treatment. It's the rest of the time that's complicated,
Right.
and that's where you come in.
That is where I come in.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're finishing up because I got to get on with my day, and you also do, hopefully. My question I usually ask guys. I don't know if you ever listen to it until the end of the podcast.
I have, but I don't remember it. I remember that you asked.
I ask a question. If you had a chance to like get up on top of the rooftop and yell to the world like a message, like what would you say your message is to the world? I like to hear people's messages.
I don't
Or
think-
one of your messages. It doesn't
I
have
sort
to.
of have something came up, unfortunately. I didn't even know about it at the time, and today people call me, when things happen negatively. Someone, a parent, got themselves into a lot of trouble. Drunk driving, really sad story. Thank God everyone's okay. And people are very quick to judge, and I'm just like, clearly someone has to be suffering, like, to do that. Was very drunk. So it's sort of like that reminder, like, as a community, we need to remember, like, people are sick. Like, I think today anyone who's using substances or drinking to a point of consequences, it's because they're suffering, to some extent. That was just like something that recently that happened. Thank God a lot of people stepped up, and I try to remind people. A lot of people, unfortunately, do similar things, Driving while smoking weed can't be great these days. Like, it's just not. Sorry to anyone that does it. I apologize.
But you're saying that people
yeah.
are suffering. You should see that first.
Yeah, it's hard because it is bad.
Yeah.
Drunk driving is really bad. I get it. Like, people are sick, But my message from the rooftops, I don't know. I'm very invested in this project. So, my personal message is like what you're saying is like, trust us. We're here to help. But I'm happy to send to other places that help. That's what this is all about.
Right.
I try to get it when I get a phone call from someone. I try to always think what's best for them first. And then when I hear at the end of the call or after I've sent them somewhere, oh, my son would love to go to Israel, I'm like, great, you know. But if I get on the phone with the intention of like, oh, I need to get this guy into my treatment program, I'm going to end up with a guy that doesn't belong there. So it's an interesting consequence, because it's not just you might get them. You might get a payment. You know, you've got guys here that, you know, and you realize they weren't a fit. Like, it's never worth it. So we get reminders,
right?
If we really care about everyone else, like even if it was from a good place.
Okay, one more. That was awesome.
Yeah, I don't know if I answered it, but it's okay.
I think you did. The other question I ask sometimes is, do you have any questions for me? I do the interview, and I realize sometimes.
Yeah, I mean,
you don't have to. I'm just throwing it your way. For your future podcast, you got to learn how to do questions.
Well,
why don't you have a podcast? Dude, your whole program should have a podcast.
I don't have the time.
No, not you. Get your clinical staff to do a podcast so people know what the heck is going on.
We have some very talented people, and we took a model. One of the reasons it works, they don't all work for us full time, so it definitely makes time complicated.
Well, you should make a podcast. Yeah. It's great. It's great marketing, and it's so cheap.
You tell me videos are also really good for websites and SEO and things.
Yes,
like that.
yes.
That's what I'm told by the professionals.
That's what they say.
But I guess because we were on the topic, as long as it doesn't. What do you look for in a treatment center? It's a tough one because we both really struggle with
it. It is.
Centers.
Wow, such a good question, because obviously. I mean,
you already answered the people.
Well, the people is a big thing. Okay. I'm really, really looking for places. So first of all, they got to be professional and have their act together and have good staff and all that stuff. But more than that, for an understanding that this is the beginning of a very long journey. And that, like what you said before, you're planning, you know, how they're going to leave by the day they show up. Like, if you're not, like, I have, like, we were talking about other programs, like, they have their sober living they send to down the block, right? And wonderful. They got a nice little gig going it's really easy. And when the guy messes up there, he comes back. And, you know, it's like a whole little revolving door situation. Right. So, you know, like, that's not what it's doing. You know, you have to realize that this guy, let's say he's in Reading, Pennsylvania, and he goes to sober living next door in Reading, Pennsylvania, and he's an Orthodox Jew. Like, what are the odds he's going to stay in Reading, Pennsylvania, and go to those meetings? So when I really want them to have a much broader picture of what is happening in the next year or two. Like, not, I'm going to hit you up with a solid, gorgeous program for 30 days, and then you're on your own.
Right.
Like, that's what I want to know.
So it is interesting, and not to knock any places. Mm-hmm. When they just do residential level care, it's helpful in that sense, because then they're hyper-focused.
Yeah.
And they don't compete, because they need sober livings and our villages if
they
don't have it. So I actually like that about certain treatment centers also. They usually do a very good job because they're just focused on the 28 days, or you could stay 2 months, but it's still residential care.
Right.
I have one I work with in Florida right now very seamlessly. They do primary mental health also. They have separate programs within the building, and I do primary mental health outpatient without SUD also. And they don't have sober living. They don't do outpatient. You get a discharge planner as part of your team.
Right.
From day 2, 3, 4, whatever it is, because it's complicated, the next steps. This
is
a long process.
And people usually go home.
Yeah.
How are they going to deal at home?
People should go home.
Yeah.
Actually.
So now, how are you going to deal at home? And the reason I got so frustrated and built this sober living, even though that question that I asked you was like, why the heck are you doing another Jewish program? They all fail. I don't even say it that way. It's rough. It's rough. I could have 1 or 2 organizations say we don't want to send to you, and that's it. I'm sunk. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Interestingly, and not to go off, so we could end this, but so I worked with the general population in New York City, the women.
Yeah.
I had Jews. I mean, those were probably scholarship cases because I was charging enough money. I couldn't afford it sometimes.
Right.
And I didn't go to Jewish treatment. Like I said, the fact that Rabbi Lipsker was there, that definitely helped.
Right.
We got kosher food. I was probably just like using that to cover up something at the time because it didn't really match with what I was up to. And then I had a little glimpse into what Jewish treatment can be, not thinking I was going into it. That wasn't even our business plan. We have an outpatient in Florida. That's
Right.
And I saw the power of being with 5, 10 other Jewish men. And at the same time, the living room and our place as an organization, and probably our village, please correct me because now I'm speaking for you, is an Orthodox organization, but just comes with no expectations.
Yes.
So what I saw, being in recovery all these years, with a lot of kids who grew up with a lot of religious trauma, I mean, or ultra-Orthodox backgrounds, which I don't come from. I come from a very modern, liberalish background. I saw when they went to all these other treatment centers and got sober, and they got sober there, the elephant in the room was left untouched.
Right.
By being around an Orthodox environment with zero expectations, I give the example, not here, but in other places, smoking a cigarette on Shabbos and then singing Zmiros at the table is probably the most healing treatment there is for an Orthodox Jew.
It could be.
And at the end of the day, sitting in therapy with other Jewish men is probably different than sitting in therapy with just people from different backgrounds. It's just...
It is.
How
It
it
is
works.
really needed, and I want it to work. So
I mean,
I'm glad.
you're
I
too.
accidentally had 3 people from your program, but it was worth it because I love you guys, and it was really nice sitting with you, and just seeing you
Thank
was
for
pretty
having me
awesome.
out here.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you for this day that I've been given. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for this chance. Thank you for this chance to live a new